Well, let me just start by first addressing the two different organizations, Decent Labs and Decent DAO, and kind of what is the relationship between these two.
Totally, yeah. So Decent Labs has been around since 2017. We were founded in May of that year, and we were a decentralized application development agency. So our team would brand, design, and develop products for startups in what we called crypto, and now I guess we call Web3. And so we began during the ICO bull run of 2017, where projects were raising capital, and they were raising capital for pitches that often didn't even pass feasibility when placed upon under
Yeah.
further scrutiny. Um, and yeah, we did that for 5 years and grew a business around it, um, but always planned and always hoped for two things. One, to decentralize and operate as a decentralized organization, because I felt kind of disingenuous being the CEO of a company working in this industry. And also, two, to develop our own software. And the relationship between Decent Labs and Decent DAO today is like Decent Labs has kind of is sort of in the process of like giving all of itself to develop this product and protocol that's now governed by a decentralized community. And yeah, so that's a transition that we've kind of undertook over the last couple of years from a traditional company into a DAO.
Nice. And you were just saying beforehand that you used to just build decentralized applications on Ethereum as an agency before you moved into helping other organizations become decentralized on Ethereum.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we've worked with a lot of cool organizations over the years, and I mean, we started, like I said, early 2017. We would go to conferences, walk up to booths. I'd ask people to tell me about their protocol. I'd ask them what technical challenges they were facing, and often they were like, "Well, we have this idea, but we don't know how to build it." And my co-founder Adam and I were really passionate about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and we would yeah, just pick up Solidity development contracts, and that's how we started Decent Labs.
That's a cool story. And that's a cool time to kind of, make it through 2017 when everything used to be still quite like relatively a wild west at the time. Like you had the ICO bubble that you mentioned where it was crazy to just observe it from the sidelines. I was into crypto that time. I was probably my second introduction into crypto was around 2017. Our first one was a few years before when I was just mining Bitcoin and well, with my GPU and lost my wallet and just put me off for a couple of years before I got back into it eventually. Uh, Such are the times.
Definitely.
um, I was just gonna ask you about one quote that you have on the website from Robert Heinlein, which resonates with me quite a lot, and I wanted to get your understanding of what that quote means for you personally, and for Decent DAO. So it goes, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects.
I'm familiar with this quote, but where was it on our website?
It's on the explore page. If you go past the project, it's underneath the core projects that you have that you're currently working with, or you have helped fund.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, that's awesome. Um,
It's a great quote. It's a fantastic quote.
yeah, and second of all, yeah, I mean, what does that quote mean to me? Um, yeah, so I think probably if I'm talking about that in the realm of decent, I'm referring to the startup mentality. I mean, in terms of like my own working principles, one of them that I try to stick to is doing the things that nobody else is willing to. And that comes from like my entrance into the workforce as a young man was basically like doing really hard jobs or doing like nasty jobs that nobody else wanted to do. And that's kind of like,
Yeah.
you can sort most like young man jobs into those two categories, right? Like
Yeah.
lift up the heavy thing and put it back down, or do this gross thing that no one else wants to have to think about. And so, that attitude has stuck with me over the years in terms of like willingness to just do the thing. And how that's evolved now is, the way that I think about like customer relationships and really like business development in general, in terms of being willing to go like above and beyond. And luckily, I no longer have to like lift heavy stuff or anything like that. But spending time with people and like making someone's experience interacting with your business or your product like really special, just takes a lot of effort and energy, and that's definitely something that I believe in. So, I also just think of myself mostly as like a generalist. Like I'm pretty good with learning quickly to like a acceptable level at most things. And so like I think operating at an acceptable level at most things has been really effective for me.
Yeah, well, I guess it's also a really good. I think it's generally better to have a broad skill set where you are proficient enough at doing several things rather than being really good at doing this one thing. Particularly if you're coming from a startup environment where you more often than not have to wear many hats, right? Especially if you start off with a small team, you might have to do development, you might have to do marketing, you might have to do PR. I think it makes sense from an entrepreneurial perspective to be able to do more than one thing.
Definitely. Yeah, and
uh,
that's definitely served me a lot as a founder over the years. From I guess just a standpoint of being willing to jump in and out of things, and also every every aspect of the role of an entrepreneur is seasonal, and so there are times when I have to be more of a builder, more of a salesperson, more of an operator, more of a financial or legal thinker. And that's where, decentralized organizations actually excite me so much, because they really, to me, I work at the intersection now of decentralization and law, more so than at the intersection of decentralization and finance, which is kind of how I entered the industry. So that's very exciting for me, and also challenging in terms of wrapping my head around how I can contribute in that space.
right. So you said you work more at the intersection of decentralization and law. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that means and what exactly it is that you're working on?
Totally. So, I mean, when we started this DAOification process, DAOification is the term that
I
we
like
used to
that.
use to describe it. And the reason we called it that was like, okay, well, we have this 5-year-old organization, and it's like, small business, but relatively serious. Like we were doing millions in revenue every year, and had about 30 employees, and um, and culture that had been developed over the course of 5 years that we all cared about, wanted to hold on to. And so the question was like, how do we get all of these awesome people that we've developed this team of over the years of Decent to work on a truly decentralized project? And first of all, like that was impossible, like right off the gate. I wish that we hadn't realized or attempted in that moment to just like do to basically like have everything. Like we wanted to have the same security and structure and comfort and cultural expectation of a traditional company, but become decentralized. So like that just doesn't make any sense. Um, and you know that started a multi-year process of understanding like what roles in a decentralized organization need to be more sticky and permanent and take the form of like elected leadership positions, what roles are transient and can be carried out by this kind of like supposed ethereal talent pool of people that are willing to contribute to DAOs. Where are those people? That doesn't really exist actually. So there's a really big like process of figuring out how do we execute in a decentralized fashion effectively, so that we don't just like go to zero like most decentralized projects are destined to. And also there's this question of like, how do we do that safely? Because outside looking in, I've seen so many tokenized projects over the years that basically all sorts of bad things in this adversarial and opportunistic market occur to. And so, how do we like believe in this technology and actually operate as a decentralized protocol with like a governance token and like using crypto for what crypto is designed for, but still succeed as an organization? And how do we navigate regulatory uncertainty and make progress? And so these are the things where like I've been playing with over the last couple of years is figuring out like how do I do that safely for our team members? You know, that's one of our core values is safety. It's our last core value, but it's safety first, right? So
Yeah,
how
I
do
mean
we
it's
do
an
it?
important thing to have and to have in mind at all times, especially because of all the uncertainty in the regulatory space. So when it comes to operating or incorporating a DAO, right? How does how does the law relate to that? Who are the parties involved that can ultimately take responsibility for the DAO or the decisions that the DAO makes with regards to the regulatory landscape? Supposedly, if it's a really large DAO, say hundreds or thousands of people involved, that
Well,
becomes more complex.
yeah. So this is very subjective, unfortunately. And this is like one of the reasons why I'm so interested in the intersection of decentralization and law, and why, if you're an attorney watching this who cares about such things or a politician of any kind, please reach out because I'd love to talk. So, I mean, fundamentally, if we look at a DAO in its simplet format, that's a group of people who've coordinated through an on chain mechanism like a multi sig or a token or NFT collection in order to create decisions together at a base level, generally like manage a treasury, right? And so we're making decisions that have real world impact quantified by money. And if we look at that as a group of US people, and I'm going to be mostly referring to US cases here because truthfully, many of these things just don't apply in other jurisdictions. But this is where venture capital and innovation happens at like a massive scale. And, you know, we want the United States to play a significant role in the future economy as well. So that's the law, and that's the law that people follow suit in terms of financial regulation. So anyway, point is, um, doing that in the United States with no legal entity of any kind is just a loose grouping of people that are doing a money activity together. You know, that is what we would call like an unlimited liability partnership, meaning there's no business established and explicitly stated. And thusly, all of the people involved are like acting personally as independent agents, and based on their, you know, relative influence or ownership in that system, they are liable for the activities. And so this is why like corporate entities exist, is so that I can go try something like risky in an effort to produce value for the world without jeopardizing my personal like safety. And also, that's not really true. Just to be fair, as an entrepreneur, like generally speaking, when businesses fail, entrepreneurs get totally like fleeced and hung out to dry. So I would just say like don't think that those things even work that well, because at the end of the day we are people. Anyway, um, so what's like the step up from there would be creating like a corporate entity structure of some kind. And if you're creating a corporate entity structure of some kind in the United States for a DAO, the issue becomes like we don't even have clear legislation on tokens. Okay. So like tokens are like the most simple aspect of this entire system. It's like a fucking number. Sorry, pardon my French. It's a
That's
number
cool.
of like ownership value in a system of decision making. So like pretty simple. It's like voting weight, right? Like we don't have to think about it in terms of like DeFi Ponzi's. I'm just talking about this as like a accrual system of ownership that happens to be programmable. So it's far superior to the operating agreement that I have in place with my co-founder or any other entity structuring agreement that exists on paper today. So like it's better. We should invest in it as a country and as entrepreneurs. Um, so like if because the U.S. doesn't have legislation that's clear or like clear regulatory guidelines on how to launch a governance token or what to do if your NFT collection has a treasury that it would like to manage together, or what liability is placed on an individual signer of a multi-sig if the multi-sig was funded by a DAO and that DAO doesn't have an explicitly stated entity. All of these things are like totally undefined. And so your options are either to operate with total personal liability in the United States, or basically like sacrificing this like freedom and experimentation, or move the global organization to like a other domicile internationally that has like more advanced regulations on the topic of digital assets and on-chain organizations and decentralized protocols, and then simply follow suit to like what we expect and what top lawyers are sort of like emitting out as like these are what we think the best practices to operate in the United States will be. Or better yet, maybe more accurate is here are the best practices that other jurisdictions are adopting, and we hope someday that the US follows suit. And in the meantime, here's how to remain compliant in those. So this is all really confusing, and it results in like innovation and money and jobs going from the US elsewhere, which is like both part of that's a positive impact on a global organization, but I think overall has a negative impact on the United States economy. So I do really hope that we like, fix that and like allow innovation to happen safely in the United States. Decent is trying to solve that a little bit through software.
I was also going to talk to you about that. There's definitely something that I meant to discuss with you, but I also want to talk. I was talking to your colleague Dara just before the recording, and he mentioned that although you guys operate in the US, I think he said that you're incorporated in, was it Cayman Islands? Did I get that right? Was it Marshall Islands or somewhere?
Well, no,
Uh,
so Decent Labs is a US company, right? We're just like a software development studio that's building products for Decent DAO. But Decent DAO, which I'm not like a leader in, or like a member of, is incorporated in the Cayman Islands because of their advanced clear regulations. So we were able to hire like, you know, basically people and lawyers and attorneys that could uh, work with other people that cared about the decent ecosystem and wanted to invest in it and grow it to like set up an entity that works that way, and again, like that's super limited to like international parties who want to help decent grow and succeed. So it's
Yeah, and
complicated.
that basically goes back to what you were saying about the safety aspect of it, right? It helps people that are part of the DAO have a limited liability and have some sort of safety in this.
Yeah, so for US persons like myself, I think the most, we're currently just operating as an LLC, just because that's the best thing. And so like, that's how we keep, decent labs compliant in the United States, but also extremely limited in terms of like very genuinely speaking, like I don't have control or authority over the DAO anymore at all. Like I designed it and helped like deploy it, um, but at no point was I like in control of that system. It was more like just participating in conversation. So, which is very limiting, I think, but it is also, just the way that it is at this point. Um, and yeah, in the United States, I think that the best option beyond LLC that's currently on the table is a DUNA, or a this is a new entity that's coming out of Wyoming. Wyoming pioneered the DAO LLC, I believe, in like 2018, but it hasn't seen much adoption. Like primary criticism is that it seems like paperwork and filings are pretty typical of a traditional U.S. organization, and so it's like, what do you get other than just calling it a DAO? Now, in this case, the DUNA is a type of organization based on the UNA model, or the I think it's unincorporated nonprofit association, that is basically like more alike in structure spiritually to what we expect DAOs to be, and where parties are members in a more like loose affiliation. And so I think for the United States, the DUNA entity structure looks attractive for way more nuanced reasons than those I just listed, but it fits the mold of like what we're looking for better than these other existing entity structures. And so we're interested to see that. But it doesn't resolve the fact that at a federal level, tokenized protocols of all stripes aren't really clearly legislated or recognized. And as a result, like I think the pattern seems to be that DAOs, when they do require some form of like leadership or administration, that occurs primarily outside of the US.
I see, and yeah. Well, I think that in the US, there's been some small but important victories for crypto and blockchain in the last year or so,
Agree.
and it seems, and I was also talking to the people at Bancor that I was just telling you before, that they're currently not operating in the US because of the regulations there, but they are keeping an eye on the regulatory side of things in the states. And Mark, I think the product lead there, was saying that he feels that in the future the US will. It looks like that the regulatory framework is shifting to a way that it will allow all of these DeFi protocols and DAOs to exist and to thrive. And honestly, it would be such a stupid decision not to allow these organizations. They're not going to go away, and I don't think you should try to stop some form of technology just because the technology itself exists. Um, and it might force you to change the amount of control you have. We've had top down organizations for the most part of history because we couldn't really do anything else, not necessarily because they're the most efficient form of organization. So I'm really hoping to see a
Definitely.
change there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, where I've seen us evolve over the last few years as like a ecosystem, and I've been like lurking and watching a lot of other DAOs and being very slow and steady in terms of like how we launch and deploy decent. Um, and a big part of that is, to your point, like how these type of structures exist. And here's the thing. I'm not convinced that a bottom up management structure is going to be effective for execution of anything as well as like a traditional corporate structure. But where bottom up approaches succeed and corporate structures that are top down hierarchical tend to fail is like taking account for every stakeholder involved in a decision. And so there's all these voices that aren't heard, and thus we have like, rapid innovation in healthcare that's reliant on the petrochemical industry that causes people in the area near the factories to get sick. And like, so it's like weird, like, why are we doing all this to ourselves? Trap that we fall in. And so I think like government attempts to do that, but seems to be fairly ineffective when it comes to swift action. Corporates are great at swift action, but ignore the consequences. And so, could we use a DAO to establish a structure of accountability where accountability is bottom up, but it's to empower leaders who need to execute top down to be effective, but they are held more accountable. There's transparency in terms of their actions. Governance can happen very quickly on a mobile device, um,
Mm-hmm.
with an extreme response rate and verified voting, so that you don't have to worry about voters not even thinking that their votes matter because we can prove that they were counted accurately.
Right.
And so like these are like just like decision making processes that I think allow us to establish leaders in a much more transparent and accountable setting. And so that's what we're trying to do with Decent. It's like we tried, and I mean we as in Decent and we as in like the collective, restarting like governance and political science with DAOs and being like direct democracy, or there's been like a feudal era for DAOs, and there's been like a French Revolution for DAOs, and it's been really interesting. But basically, like where we're at now is, we're back to delegated democracy, because delegated democracy is fairly effective. It's the most modern system. Until we like can at least support that in a DAO format, then how are we going to get anything else done? So the way it works at Decent, and this is why the regulatory aspect is so important, is like we have a decentralized consensus and like a decentralized governance system that results in the election of leaders of the Decent Foundation, the legal counsel that's required to make the DAO operate safely in the real world, leaders of specific projects and aspects of Decent that own like significant strategic input, like anything that results in decisions being made, future outcomes for the organization, potential risk to the project itself. Like all of those things ultimately need to resolve at the decentralized leadership level, because like otherwise this isn't a decentralized organization, and it has a lot of risks inherent to it that we don't want present in transparent open source systems. So, I think like we're trying to build tools to make it possible for orgs to operate in a safe, decentralized way without without like making the contributors unsafe, right? And by building a software suite that mirrors the off-chain structure that's necessary to make that safety a reality as well.
Yeah, and I think what I'm about to say now probably feeds into your protocol that you were mentioning just a few minutes ago. But there are two parts of in governance, right? There's always the voting, which has its own set of complexities, right? Usually in a DAO based on the number of tokens that you hold, though it could also be distributed. But then there's also the submitting and making of a proposal, which I feel that's where it gets really interesting, because in traditional governance, you don't always have the opportunity to create a proposal, to put it in front of the voters, and let the voters act on that proposal. Um, is that something that you guys like? How do you guys handle proposals, and how flat is the proposal making structure within the DAO?
Yeah, definitely. So for Decent itself, we run any decisions that require action in our treasury through the on-chain proposal process, and we run decisions that affect like strategy or agreements between DAO members and core contributors through an off-chain proposal process, both of which are available in Decent's UI. So we use Snapshot and Decent's own governance contracts to do the off-chain and on-chain respectively, and then we participate in governance through the Decent app that's available at decentdao.org. Um, Also, through Decent, we have established sub DAOs in the form of multi-sigs, so that budget is available to leadership that can be spent in a more like granular, quick way without needing top level governance decision making. But because we use Decent for this, token holders actually still have ultimate authority over the multi-sig and can veto transactions, freeze the multi-sig, clawback funds, and other ways to basically like protect themselves and not to sever the connection of authority, responsibility, and liability between token holder and multi-sig signer. And we suggest most DAOs to be set up this way now, where leadership positions are elected in the form of a council. And we use hats and Sablier in our system as integrations that allow you to create roles in the form of hats and payments for streams or payment streams for those roles using Sablier in the form of stablecoin or native token. And that way you kind of have a leadership position, but it's been elected by token vote, and token vote can take away that position or, still has authority. And so this is like a form of, I guess, optimistic governance where we're delegating to people and trusting them. But on chain, token holders are still ultimately in authority, or whatever your top level of governance is. It might be NFT collection, it might be ERC20 governance token, it might be just a giant multi-sig. So we allow all of that to exist in our system.
Right. And when the voters are choosing the council members, is there a defined number of years or months that they're allowed to perform the role as member of the council? And when does that change, if ever?
So we're about to run our first elections, and I think we're going to
Oh,
do 6 months.
okay.
So I guess we have to put up the proposal and see how people react to the tenure. But our concept here is not so like important to think about decentralization, right? Like when I first got into this, my thought was that like, okay, if we make leadership positions elected, they're going to be like vied after by many people, and it's going to turn into kind of like, oh, excuse me, kind of like competitive PvP environment, which we see in DeFi. But the thing about DeFi is that capital is fungible. And so we're talking about like money from X and money from Y. Ultimately, what matters is it being cheaper. When I've worked with DeFi firms, I've noticed that the financial software buying mentality is very much in like percentage points of profit impact, not in terms of like user experience or like how much they like the team that they work with. Whereas if you try to sell HR software, getting really close with like an HR director is like a really effective approach. So when it boils, and that just is based on like people's preferences and like the work that they do and what their daily experience is like. When it comes to um, when it comes to oh, sorry, man, I just spaced out. What was the question again?
No, that's cool. I was asking about the process of electing and choosing members of the council, but we can take it further from there because I was also I meant to ask. I'm sure you're aware that one of the limitations of a DAO is when having to make decisions which are quite technical in nature. You might not have the technical members of a DAO making those technical decisions. So again, how do you ensure that the members of the council are the right people for that position?
Ah, right. Now that brings my memory. So basically, like I said before, like we're not selling PvP DeFi protocol stuff. Like we're talking about human organizations and the roles that make up the leadership team at a human organization are so nuanced and are so bespoke to the personalities of the people running them that it is an extremely costly and difficult thing that could destroy a system for a leader to be failing in their position or to not be replaced. And so the way that we view this voting process is like, or things start small. And so if there's a
Mm,
core team of, say, software developers or product strategists that are driving a protocol forward, and they're in an elected position, the election does not exist to make it easy to replace that person with someone better for the job. It makes it so that there is a predefined method to do so in the event of disaster. So, like,
right.
if I, as a leader, fail in my position, building decent, the product, like, that is really bad. And it needs to be possible to eject me and replace me in a mechanism that's already deployed and already exists, and I can't change or control, um, for me to consider the system safely decentralized, right? Or to be adequately
Mm,
decentralized. Because any role or any set of responsibilities that alters the future course needs to be ultimately the token holder decision or a delegate of the token holders. And so
right.
we put up those cycles for like 6 months, but although this would take a lot of effort, like I think we plan to have the also explicit ability to like, yeah, so like you can like revoke a role in Decent. So you can create a proposal to revoke a role. So let's say you get 3 months through an elected cycle. And even though we know that semi-annually we want leaders to have to go and touch base on what they did, how it went, and why they should be up for election again. Halfway through that process, if someone just like spins out completely or goes rogue, there needs to be a method for token holders to protect themselves. And so you can do that using Decent, which is pretty cool.
That's fascinating. I love this form of governance that seemingly resembles, back the Republic days of ancient Rome, like people taking control and having representatives of the public voted by the public. It almost feels like you could bring. I mean, no, you could totally bring a DAO-like structure with on-chain governance and rule a country under that. I think maybe the kind of the things that you guys are doing is you're testing the waters of this new governance form in in somewhat of a contained environment, right? Organizations running independently but as a DAO. um, but if this proves a successful experiment, you never know, 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, it's entirely possible that we might have countries operating as DAOs, or a slightly more decentralized version of governing a nation.
Well, this is why regulation is such a recurring topic in this conversation. It's like my vision for DAOs is that the world's most vital institutions like healthcare, education, um, energy, agriculture, things that like really are like the backbone of society, that like these are the systems that are the most archaic and bureaucratic and impact us all negatively the most by not having more aligned incentive structures. And, DAOs are potentially a means for more democratic process to occur faster in those systems and to allow like incentives to be realigned and restructured for like actually all the stakeholders involved in those systems, like to serve better. So, which is quite like this like accelerationist viewpoint of like, let's put all of our vital infrastructure on computers on JavaScript. But it's like, whatever. Anyway, it seems more likely to me that that solves or helps than we like all quit and go take jobs at like the biggest corporations in the world in an effort to change them from the inside out. So, anyway, like point is like, that's what's important to me. And to get there, we have to have safe crypto, and safe crypto is decentralized crypto that's deployed as smart contracts, not fucking FTX or any other custodial solution, Web 2.5 bullshit that's like making money in crypto but using traditional software. So we have to do it that way for it to be safe, and doing it that way is questionably legal. So that's like the biggest issue I see in crypto right now that like I want to inject myself in more is like, how do we resolve that? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Would you say that decentralized organizations, blockchain in general, would this ecosystem have been further ahead had there not been any not major regulatory challenges?
Well, I mean, I think it's inevitable, right? So when I got into crypto, super naive. Like I started decent when I was 21 years old, so I had no idea like what anything was to do with like business or law or financial regulation. And my stance on regulation was very naive. It was that like regulation shouldn't exist, and the accredited investor label exists to keep poor people poor, and or to imply that poor people are dumb and don't deserve to make their own decisions when it comes to their money. And all this other stuff was basically like red tape put in place to insulate banks and other financial institutions from competition. But then I like witnessed through my own eyes, through crypto maturing and evolving, and how many people got ripped off in the process, that like there's a reason why regulation exists, and that like financial custodianship is like a very considerate, sacred, and intimate experience and relationship. And like these are things that have to be like very careful for our society. And otherwise, there are victims. Like there are people who like ruin their lives financially. Sometimes to the point of like suicide or having heart attacks from stress. Like people even die over poorly handled financial decisions, right? Like this is like really traumatic, important stuff for
Right.
people. So
Yeah.
I think
Though you could argue that you could make bad decisions financially in stocks, in forex, in just going to Nevada, going to Las Vegas, and just blowing it all on hookers and coke and slots. It, it's one financial instrument which again it allows people to express their natural human greed. I think as long as that exists, and it will forever exist, within ourselves. Anything that's potentially exploitable or that elicits FOMO into someone, there will be a certain number of people that
yeah.
can't help themselves.
Well, and there's a great example. A lot of people like sex, drugs, and gambling, and I'm not one to judge, but if sex, drugs, and gambling were unregulated everywhere in the world, I think would be a terrible place to live in. Instead of just
Yeah.
things that are only allowed at 1 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas. So I think basically all that is to say, like, there is a necessity for regulation for crypto, like in the United States, for it to be explicit, for it to allow experimentation by startups, for it to make the consequences very clear and severe for like true scammers and opportunists. It's difficult because the systems we're talking about, the disparity between a scam and something real is generally a technical one. And so, how do we get non experts in such a niche subject matter to craft effective policy? There's just so much communication that needs to happen, but it
Mm.
will happen. And I think that like again, the answer is if we want to be on the bleeding edge in the United States, then it needs to be tokenized protocols, organizations that take the form of smart contracts, free and open source software, decentralized governance that happens in public view. We need to be safe doing all that stuff, because that already puts us in terms of disclosure and transparency miles ahead of what is required by the stock market, right? So if we are allowed to operate in a truly decentralized fashion, we solve a lot of those issues. Um, so seeing standards set for what that means would be great. You know, we're currently operating on a PDF that someone sent us from Andreessen a year ago. So, and
I feel, yeah, no, 100%. And when it comes to decentralized organizations, the reason I find them not only fascinating as a form of governance, but really, really an important form in today's society, is that I look back at the books that were written back in the 90s about cyberpunk novels, and all of them like depicting this anarcho-capitalistic future, like when you have this corporation that owns all of the streets, or this corporation that owns all of the hospitals, and you read these books and like, oh, I couldn't live in that world. I would do something about it if I could. But then people, some people don't realize that Google owns 97.4% of the world's search traffic, right? AWS owns over 50% of the world's compute on the internet. AWS goes down, like half of the internet goes down with it. And I feel that, and I totally, have the same sentiment there. These services should be decentralized. You shouldn't have, as an organization, the power to control over 97% of what people see, what people search for, to dictate narratives, or to enforce the narratives that you as an organization prefer or you think are just. So there's, and I guess the question is it too late for people to adopt a freedom as opposed to convenience?
yeah, I mean, you know, it's really cool because um, I remember internet when I was a kid being like way more of a thing of like not being sure what you would experience on it. Like Flash was awesome. So there was like this super like artistically expressive aspect of the internet where like Flash websites and games and animations were like, you know, super popular. And that was like a way more expressive medium that the internet was built in more by like designers than by developers at that stage. There was also, and not saying you can't do both. I'm just saying there's, you know, there's a difference. And you know, downloading like keygens for pirated software that had like drum and bass playing and like the cool little animations, and it was super more like creative and like kind of like wild. And I definitely think, yeah, I mean, when you say 97+% of the internet search traffic belongs to Google, it's sort of like, yes, and I know exactly what I'm going to get every time I type in a search. Like I already know, like, and I know like the main media outlets that it's going to share with me if I look up a popular opinion or topic. And it's all very predictable, and it just works like a SaaS product because it's also like algorithmically predisposed to the things that it knows that I want from it, which for me is primarily like work and building software. So it's really good at that, right? Because it's,
Yeah.
you know, the internet made by people like us. So yeah, now what's cool is with like the Web3 stuff, honestly, and at first I didn't really get it because like I got into crypto through Bitcoin in high school, and it was very like Bitcoin was a super aggressive, like anarchistic response to the banking crisis in the United States and then globally. And like the NFTs, like NFTs really brought in like a big wave of like I would say like consumer crypto people or people who are more
Mm.
attracted to it as like a creative medium and social movement. And I kind of like rolled my eyes at that at first because I was so bought into like the burn down the Fed narrative. And so I
Yeah.
thought it was like
Yeah.
distracting. But the reality is, it's like the stuff that like culture does is that like now when I go to crypto conferences, I see a bunch of people even younger than me who are building really cool shit on the internet that like looks fun and interesting, like the internet did when I was growing up. So that's like really sweet. Like I think that like the next generation of like Web3 people, they're building on like cheap and expensive blockchains. They're building better user experiences. They have their own art and creative and communication movement that's occurred that's like super unique. It like makes me feel like not like the young new person building the new stuff. So that's super exciting, man. It's been fun to watch that happen over the last few years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't ever considered, that the kind of the NFT hype could be equated to the back of the 90s, where you used to have this, and early 2000s, where software and UI and UX just used to be really really different, and now everything's standardized. That's interesting. I also felt the same way about NFTs when they first came out. I thought initially that Ethereum's barely able to handle 7 transactions per second. Why do we add all of this stuff on the chain when we can just focus on what it's supposed to do, right? But it just happened to become a much bigger thing than it was at the beginning. I think smart contracts, when they were first created, and that was back in the 90s, they were supposed to just uphold an agreement between two third parties. But then you add blockchain and you add the ledger on these smart contracts, and suddenly it opens up the world for organizations like Decent to build decentralized structures that work at a distance and globally, which I think is fantastic. I also meant to ask you about the actual protocol that you've built, because I know we kind of launched into this philosophic discussion, which was amazing, but I didn't really get a whole lot of time to talk to you about the protocol and how it is that you help other organizations become decentralized. I know that it's a process. If you'd be willing to talk a bit about it, I think that'd be super interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can check it out at decentdao.org. And basically, Decent went down this path of becoming a DAO and a venture studio, building our own software. And becoming a DAO and building software at a oh, excuse me, and building software at a fast pace that one would expect from a venture-backed startup was impossible using the current ways of thinking, operational strategies, and technology that was available 2 years ago when we began that. And doing it from a standpoint where I thought it was like safe from a on-chain decentralization perspective and from an off-chain legal perspective was certainly impossible for us 2 years ago. So what Decent is a result of 2 years of research with leading law firms in the crypto industry, large and small scale DAOs, users of governor contracts, safe contracts, and the various ways that people have learned to participate in on-chain governance, and people voting through multi-sigs, governance tokens, and NFTs, all to kind of create like a single unified interface to allow organizations to operate more effectively and do so in a truly on-chain manner. So the way that we've accomplished this is we built a user interface that integrates with all the popular governance tools like Safe, Snapshot, Hats for roles, Sablier for payment streams, and others for other aspects of like the DAO operational stack. And basically, what Decent allows you to do is structure your organization in any way that you might need to represent different councils, members, committees, token holders, NFT collections that have administrative functionality over one another, and then define roles within those different parts of the organization in the form of elected positions with token vesting and stablecoin payments, manage your treasury, and do all of these other activities that are required for like a DAO to function. And it's through a very familiar kind of SaaS-like software interface that
Mm-hmm.
resolves in proposals being automatically created and deployed to your DAO when you need to actually enact any change. So it's like traditional HR software experience resolves through decentralized governance, backed up by smart contracts that ensure that the connections between the different aspects and the players in your organization are actually being formed on chain in a secure way.
Right. That sounds very cool. And do you guys advise at all during that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, a lot of people are just getting started on forming DAOs. And so we're working with teams to take them through organizational, oh, excuse me, it's early over here in California, through the organizational design process, the governance design process, and also since we're a small team and we're looking to acquire like more users as quickly as we can, implementing features that other teams are interested in so that we're able to build up the product to meet the needs of the market.
Right, right. That's cool. That's cool. So you mentioned you're advising. What are the latest or the current organizations that you've helped on board, or some of the more most exciting ones that you've worked with recently?
Well, just this week, we were excited because last week we rolled out our integration with HATS protocol, which
Awesome.
allows DAOs to elect and manage roles through HATS protocols NFTs. So that allows like token gated access to other applications and parts of the organization, and it's a much more like dynamic and you know um, uh, configurable way to manage
Hmm.
membership on chain. Um, and this week we met with one of our users, Contango, which is a VC fund, who launched VantaDAO, which
Hmm.
is effectively an angel investment syndicate in the form of a DAO. And they're working with us on Oregon governance design. We just wrapped up those steps, and now we're focused on deploying them on chain. And they'll be using that new feature to elect council members and other key positions of the angel syndicate that will need authority to form proposals and modify and adjust settings for the DAO and submit them to the DAO for governance.
That's very cool. I feel like this entire conversation is like a almost like a masterclass in someone wanting to start a DAO. You've just spitting out names of all the different protocols and services that people are inevitably going to use, and I'm gonna make sure to ask either you or Dara to kind of give me a list so that I can put them all in the description, because it is just genuinely useful information to keep in mind. Um,
But what's exciting is all of those tools are accessible through one interface at
right.
decentdao.org. So you can use Decent to do everything that I just described in one place. And if you can't do it yourself, you can reach out to us. And we offer advisory on both off chain legal structuring and operational guidance for launching DAOs and on chain process for understanding, how Decent deploys smart contracts on chain for you that reflect decentralized in a secure way.
Nice. And have you seen more kind of adoption or drive to fund DAOs as a result of the recent market bull runs? By recent, I mean last 6 months ish or so.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think if we saw 2017 and 2020, I remember the last project that came out of the ICO bull run that really, excuse me, that really excited me was compound finance. And
Hmm.
compound was really cool because I remember looking at it and thinking like, yeah, this is why tokens are important because we can actually build
Yeah.
financial applications using them. Back then, very few people had the overlap to know how to build stuff like that. And then, uh, you know, it was over. Bull run was gone out like a lamb, and I was bummed because I didn't see more DeFi innovation during that cycle. Sure enough, DeFi summer comes along, and there was more innovation than I think we needed. So basically, if we follow that model and look at like DeFi summer, the really exciting thing that came out of the end of that bull run for me were like DAOs and like decentralized organizations. I feel like the base principles were set by thought leaders like Kevin Owocki from Gitcoin, and the basic tools were in place thanks to the team at Gnosis, Guild, and Safe to assemble online. And during the bear market, tools like the Zodiac module system and the ability to launch and develop more complex organizations on chain came out, but they're currently only accessible through these highly configurable and highly technical interfaces. And so, Decent's trying to resolve that last part by building a really easy UX that's familiar to regular people to do this. And if I hope that if this market cycle continues to grow and more organizations are assembling on chain, working with crypto and operating in this fashion, that DAOs are poised to be like, DAO summer or whatever. So we'll see.
That was summer. Well, you called it now. We'll have to wait and see.
Well,
Um,
everyone's saying on chain summer, right? On chain summer.
yeah.
On chain summer to me sounds like a meme where it's like we're like partying in Amalfi and like on a boat, and it's like, oh yeah, on chain summer, popping bottles. I don't know if I like that, but whatever.
No, I think it's a vibe. It's a vibe. I think whenever there's some movement, this market just there's the hype that you feel like for 2 years or so that it was gone, that people forgot about it, right? And then market pumps 20%, and then just through the woodwork come these people with all the crazy hype and memes again, and the space is all already filled with people willing to do sometimes dumb shit trading stuff, but sometimes it's just they're building incredible stuff as a result of the hype. I think it's an emotional market. It is definitely an emotional market, but I think that's also kind of what makes it a fun market to be part of, both as a builder or as an investor.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I will. I'll call it a fun market to be a part of when we accomplish my lifelong goal of 100K BTC. That's what I'm waiting for. So the day that I see Bitcoin at 100K, I'll call it a fun market.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm not big on predictions and stuff, but it honestly it's not that far away. If you look at the historical trends, if you look at the chart of Bitcoin pumps after halving, it used to be around 1.3 to 1.5 years is the new peak. So if we're just in April, that's probably going to be early 2025 that we're looking at that. Assuming history repeats itself, it might never repeat. You never know with these things. uh,
Rainbow chart, bro. It's always on point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The
Have you noticed
rainbow
how they
chart.
add a new color every cycle? Is a new color on that rainbow chart?
No, actually, I didn't notice that. That's funny.
Yeah, there's this joke on Reddit that like Bitcoin maxis keep adding colors to the rainbow chart whenever it doesn't fit the pattern.
Yeah, that's what we do. But
uh,
yeah, man, I'm excited for the future. So we'll see what happens next. But crypto has always outdone my expectations. The last time I dumped Bitcoin was when we were ripping to like 2,300, and I was like, there is no way we're ever going to exceed this. And I think I bought back in at like 8K and haven't sold a lick of crypto since. So
Yeah, fair enough, man. I mean, it's better than not coming back in at all. I have like my dad a few years ago. A few years ago, I mean, 2021, he got into crypto. Not as a result of me preaching to him. I stayed quite far away from that. I tend not to talk to my friends about it, not to do any
21 were
financial
deadly
advice.
times, sir.
I know. That's when he found out about a few coins, including one that he was particularly fond of, mainly because the project team, the product team was Romanian. It was called Elrond, which then they've changed it to Multiverse. So in this run, it's called Multiverse, right? And he liked the fact that he could take this kind of almost like pride in, hey, there's a Romanian blockchain called Elrond. I'm gonna invest in this thing, and he bought in around the top, and he kind of learned his lesson there. But I feel like it was a small price to pay for what could potentially be a lifelong obsession with crypto, I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
Good
It
lesson.
happens to all of us. There's like the last time I sold crypto and then I just stopped a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. um do you guys have, and I mean both Decent DAO and Decent Labs, any new stuff coming up for this year? Any exciting announcements that you want to make? Releases, events, anything at all?
Well, the DAO side of things are exciting because with Decent Labs having finished the HATS integration along with the HATS protocol team, the DAO is now able to elect leaders on chain. And so the first election cycle is going to look like the directors and legal counsel for the Caymans Foundation, which are already installed but are going to be reflected on chain. And so there will be like a transparent on chain kind of mirror image of the off chain legal structure, which I think is really cool. And when
That's
that's
cool.
complete, the model that we're going to follow in practice is that DAO proposals will be reviewed by the elected legal counsel and signed off prior to going to on chain governance. And the DAO now has the ability to basically like take in token holder proposals and then ration about what needs to happen off chain to make this compliant and legal in the Cayman's jurisdiction that we operate in. And now we have a working clone of the on chain organization and token holder decision making process off chain. So that's really exciting to me, super nerdy. What does that mean? It means that in theory, Decent can now do anything. Anything that a proposal comes up for, we now have the right people in place to confirm its compliance status and to allow the DAO to operate in the real world, sign service agreements with other entities and core contributors, launch new projects, determine its future. I mean, it's like a machine of production that's now just running on its own. So it's quite a beautiful thing to witness.
That's huge. Congratulations. That's fantastic news. For people wanting to join the DAO, what must they do in order to become part of it?
For people to join the DAO, well, right now, our governance token to participate in governance are all locked up because the whole purpose of it is for decision making and collaboration. So we didn't want any stakeholders in the system to be motivated to focus on like the token from a commercial perspective because that's not its intended purpose.
Right.
Um, the tokens start to unlock in December, so I guess at that point, anyone who like really cares about Decent and wants to like get access to it can. I mean, really, the only way to contribute right now is you have to come to the DAO and say, "I wish to be a core contributor," and you have to get elected into a position. And that's the only way to join the DAO today, which is actually, I think, really cool because there's going to be a point in time where you can join the DAO just by, like, I'm sure, getting your hands on some tokens as a passive holder or participating in all kinds of ways. But it's like we're going to let the DAO kind of unfurl into this thing over time so that we can stay on a very focused path right now. So it's fun. It's like it's real and we're letting it rip, but it's like, oh yeah, until December, it's only like the 70 of us or so.
That's exciting,
Pretty
man.
cool.
That's really cool. Listen, thanks a lot for joining the pod. I had a great time, and honestly, a wealth of resource in this conversation for anyone wanting to start a DAO. So you've said that's decentDAO.org. I love it when people experiment with stuff, man, and I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. And I would love to have you on again at some point in the future, maybe after December, just to see how the launch is gone, how people are interacting, and how like decision making is taking place.
Yeah, I would love to. And you can reach me at Parker at DecentDAO.org or at Parker McCurley on Telegram. Andre, I love talking to you. Super passionate, awesome thinker. I'm excited to hear this podcast. I'm sure it'll be the best one I've done. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day, and have a great weekend, man.
Sounds good. Likewise. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye bye.